of the preamble toy show thing. And now we're going to go on to the, I guess, is this still recording?
I see a little red dot, so I hope so.
But yeah, now we're going to go on to the, it just coincidentally happened this last week that Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock, passed away.
Speaking of tragedies.
And he was 83, and he had a pulmonary disease from
apparently a long
30 years ago
disease,
he smoked, and it damaged his lungs permanently. So
yeah, of course.
But he lived to be 83, so
back then it was like, oh, you
same
know,
age
4
as
out of
my
5
father
doctors
when he
say
died,
smoke this
83.
brand.
83, but
yeah,
same difference.
When we were kids, like there was still controversy about whether smoking was even bad for you. But yeah, so now I don't know that the smoking specifically is what brought on Nimoy's pulmonary disease, but
that's what
I'm sure that didn't help.
Yeah,
that's what killed him, and I'm sure years and years of smoking
complications from it.
Not the best thing, but
my dad actually had cancer. It was different, but
yeah,
but he died at 83, just like Nimoy.
Yeah,
6 years later.
They wrote him off like back in the Pine Hill days. They were saying like, oh,
the doctors didn't think he would live any longer, and he lived for 19 more years.
Mm-hmm.
Nimoy lived for 30 more years. So there you go. But it's about right. But yeah, it's
But it's funny because I seem to recall that just the week prior to that, somehow Nimoy came up in a conversation. Anyways, so we digress a little bit.
Back to the Nimoy real quick, yeah.
But so speaking of the conventions, we were actually fortunate enough to see Nimoy several times.
Did we see him several times?
Yeah, actually one of the first cons I ever went to with you, you'd already been to some, but it was, I think, my first, and Nimoy was the big guest of honor. We were like way in the back of the auditorium, standing room only, and yeah, he got up on the stage and talked for a good long while. And
was that the San Francisco one or the San Jose one?
San Francisco, I believe. He read some of his poetry, which
wasn't very good.
Wasn't really.
It was very hippie 60s.
It was very 60s. It was
very
of
surreal.
Its time. But I mean, it was sincere though, and the thing is, like, you go to a convention and just when they walk on the stage, everyone claps. But then every time they say something, about the fandom or what it was like on the show, or you just feel the outpouring of just fan affection, and it's fairly moving because it's real. It's not posturing like when you watch the Oscars and like somebody says, I believe in getting rid of starving babies by giving them food, and everybody goes on cue, and it's like, yeah,
it's
really.
Kind of like that thing with the Miley Cyrus bringing out that allegedly poor, like,
really
homeless
good-looking
boy.
homeless guy.
And the guy was like 20-something, and he looked hot, and he had a little goatee.
He was kind of chiseled, and it was like, what gym do you afford when you're homeless?
Yeah, how the hell? That guy's not a homeless guy. You want to get a homeless guy? They should have gone out. Oh my God! They should have gone out.
It's L.A. They could have found some.
They should have just gone out in front of that place and said, "Take that guy off the street over there, staring at the wall. Bring him in here."
Oh my God! Now stand here next to Miley.
Give me $1 for a sandwich.
Yeah,
that would have been more realistic.
And it's like, yeah, it's like I
it.
get that they want to do like this, message about the homeless.
I'm not saying all of them are like that.
Oh yeah, but it reeked of a PR stunt.
But yeah, but bringing out this prissy.
But on cue, everyone in the audience, they pan over and so
that wasn't
Joe
the
is like
either. That was
weeping a little bit and sniffling and clapping, and it's like.
But that was at the VMAs, and the reason they did it was because the year before she made an ass of herself. So they're like, okay, we have to do something that makes her look like a human being again, because she's made an ass of herself.
And it's all PR, and we all know that. But that's the difference. It's like
I make an ass of myself on the Cal Cat show all the time,
professionally.
But
these are actors. They it's
really
there's always an element of performance, and I'm not knocking the profession or anything, but it's like you sense a certain calculatedness, whereas the fandom at a convention is genuine. At least it feels that way to me. Certainly, I mean, Nimoy was just,
I just gave you this really gay look right now.
As well you should.
But anyway, the people
we're about to reenact our favorite Kirk Spock / scene.
With each other.
You're wearing a yellow shirt, so I mean it's. And I got the Spock blue, so it's perfect.
Let's.
Well, not in front of the cat. We don't want to traumatize his fuzzy little brain.
But yeah, the convention thing.
But yeah, so it's Nimoy was always like one of the the best ones to, well, not best, I don't want to say like best, but he was he didn't attend all the time. So he was a little more reluctant, I think, to do the fan circuit in his later years. So it was always more of a treat when he showed up, and it was always frustrating. I think I saw him about 3 times that I can recall.
Really?
And
3?
2 for sure, possibly 3. But he never would sign autographs, and at first I just thought, well, that's, here's all your fans, and I remember this one lady was like, my, brother's dying, you're his hero, could you please just sign it? And he was like, you could tell he was really conflicted. He was like, I'm gonna really have to think about that. I'm just, I can't commit. And I was just thinking, what is the deal here? So then, of course, I looked it up, and he had actually signed a agreement with a merchandising or marketing firm that his autograph went through them as a third party. So if he had signed anything for her, he could have been sued, actually, for breach of contract.
Well, that's retarded.
Well, you know what it does, though, is it makes his autograph really expensive.
Yeah,
so,
because it was like $200 in 1990s dollars.
He always donated it to charity, as far as I know. But yeah, so even in the day, like, you could have got any of the original cast for anywhere from $20 to $50, depending on the con. Nimoy was always astronomical comparatively.
At least 100.
At least 100. Now, I think in the later years it was up to 2, and well, now that he's passed away, I'm sure add a 0 onto the end of that. Him and Shatner both.
I got pictures somewhere. But
really hard to get their autographs. I'm trying to remember whose autographs. I know I've got Nichelle Nichols. I got Michelle Barrett, Roddenberry, who is also no longer with us.
James Doohan, who's no longer with us.
James Doohan.
DeForest Kelley.
I don't think I ever got DeForest Kelley's.
Yeah, DeForest.
In point of fact, I don't think I ever got to see DeForest Kelley. I know you did once.
I think I did once, yeah.
I'm pretty sure you did.
But I got the picture later.
But yeah, I don't think either of us ever got his signature.
I see Marina Sirtis, Nichelle Nichols
Sirtis
at least 3 or 4 times. Sirtis 3 or 4 times.
And a bunch of the guys from like the spin-off series, I've got pretty much the whole cast of like Voyager at some points or another.
I don't think that I have actually...
Pretty sure I have Robert Picardo.
I think I might have to too.
I'm almost certain that we got Nana Visitor, that one con.
We got Nana Visitor.
That was awesome. She and
Terry
Farrell were sharing the stage together, and you could just see the chemistry. They were having a blast, and I think it was Farrell's first con, because this was fairly early.
And then it was her last week on the show series. After that one,
it might have been. Because this one fan was just like kind of bugging out a little bit, and Farrell, or was it Nana Visitor, tore into her a little bit. Without really meaning to, and this fan just melted down and just ran screaming out of the auditorium. She was like,
then they fired her 40 weeks later.
I mean, it's...
But yeah, Nimoy, I only recall actually seeing him once at a convention.
I know for sure that we saw him twice. There was the first con, because we were standing in the back, and you had a question, but you had like a cold and you couldn't speak.
That was the one.
So you were raising your hand, and the idea being that if he called on you, then I would ask the question for you. I don't remember what the question was.
Something to do with the hand salute or something.
Yeah, probably.
But it's like, and what was weird about that is I was asking you stuff. I had laryngitis.
Oh yeah, and so he was very
softly
asking me like, can you ask this question for me? And this lady in front of us.
There was this errands lady. She was like, I want to listen to Spock right now.
That I'm here for.
I was like, okay, it was like 1995. It was like decades ago. But it's like that lady was like freaking out. Yeah. This whispering kid in the audience.
Yeah, and it's not like we were conversing. He was asking, be that as it may.
Yeah, we
do run into eccentric...
and the Terry Farrell one was just a little later, and they're doing the same thing.
That was years later. But I remember we saw Nimoy the other time because he was showing behind the scenes and outtakes from Star Trek 4.
That's right.
In the auditorium.
Wasn't that just a little later that same day, though?
No, I don't think so. Because he wouldn't have spoken twice. I'm quite sure it was a different con.
Oh yeah. There's 2 then there. Mm-hmm. There's the one that was at the Masonic Center, which was the one where they had the cold. Because I remember the gates.
Because you didn't have a cold the second time.
And the other time was the previous. I don't think he was there as long for the previous one though.
I think
he was like on his way in and out and stuff.
Yeah, because a lot of times they would like arrive in their limo from the airport. They'd run into the convention center, run on the stage.
I don't like what happened with...
Here we go, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I gotta go.
That's what happened with Stan Lee like 2 years ago. It's like Stan Lee was...
He didn't even get to the convention center.
And then...
So it's like, you can either go get his autograph, you can go wait on the tarmac at the San Jose airport for like the whole day, throw some money at him and get him to just kind of, there you go, and miss the entire rest of the show, or you could stay and do the show and just figure, all right, well, sorry, Stan. Besides which, weren't they charging like $100 for his SIG or something?
Yeah, it was a lot.
The thing is, though, I mean,
somebody I know got it.
That's a valuable investment, just because, like, the Marvel movies have just made Stan Lee such a hot property right now. But
and I recall that I did an on-location article on I think it was the convention where I had a cold, from the on-location Pine Hill magazine, and I said, "Why Nimoy stank?" at that convention. That was the title.
Wow.
I didn't like it because apparently I had not only had a cold, but there was an annoying lady.
I think you were mad about the lady. That wasn't really Nimoy's fault.
The lady in Nimoy's poetry was really bad, but
well, you weren't in the best frame of mind to appreciate. It was actually pretty cheesy, but
if he had shown the original like audio clips of his Bilbo Baggins song, I would have gone, okay, this was awesome.
I think you were just cranky he's cranky that day.
I was cranky. But I was like Dr. McCoy
that
day. I was like, you green-blooded bastard. And Shatner was kind of a little bit ego.
Actually, Shatner was kind of like the first time I remember seeing him, he was maybe just having a bad day or something. But he was kind of like not really happy to be there. Whereas the other time that I remember seeing Shatner, he was on point, and he clearly gotten a lot more comfortable, with the fandom and, being Captain Kirk.
He likes the Vegas one.
So like,
we got to go to the Vegas
in later
one.
years, I think he embraced it more, and he was just, he had the crowd eating out of his hand. He was telling all these funny stories.
Yeah.
And the Vegas one would be awesome.
In fact, the 50th anniversary Vegas one is probably a year away, so we should go.
Oh my God. You know how crowded it's going to be.
Oh.
But it's going to be really interesting to me to see just how the fandom, which continues to not only grow and evolve, with all the newer stuff, the Abrams verse and all of that stuff, which there's going to be a whole generation that grows up,
only knows the Abrams.
Star Trek is just this movie with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto in it, and they're going to know it's based on some really old clunky thing that like their grandpa watched when back in the hippie era. So it's going to be interesting just to see like what's the legacy, of classic Trek, because when we were boys growing up, when you said Star Trek, you meant classic Trek. There wasn't even the spin-off shows. Next Generation was just a gleam in Roddenberry's eye at that point. I grew up. I would come home from school. There was a bunch of cartoons on and like some reruns of like stuff like Gomer Pyle and Petticoat Junction. And then I think it was around like 4:30, 5 o'clock. Channel 44 would show an episode of Classic Trek, and I saw every single episode of Classic Trek, and I loved it. And it was like back in those days, you could tell like, okay, yeah, I can see the wires on the little model or whatever, but you suspended your disbelief and you just lost yourself in the stories. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of been lost with the Abrams remake is that it's all spectacle and flash, but really not a lot of heart.
Well, now they got some new writing teams. So
yeah, I'm not giving up on the reboot because
not us, but
yeah, it's just I think
I gave them a script treatment, but they said no.
Just honestly think Abrams was the wrong guy for the job. If you're a fan, like an old school cranky, when I was a kid it was better fan. I mean, he definitely was the right choice from a business standpoint. He, $1 billion.
TNG started when I was 16. So, about Will Wheaton's age. So, so.
And TNG was I remember the writing on the wall was it was going to flop because
you didn't watch it.
I didn't even watch it, but I remember that a lot of at the time doing like a follow up to a classic series was kind of like this weird idea, and a lot of people were just like, "This isn't going to work." I think even Nimoy. I read some quotes from him. Originally, he said, I don't want to be a part of this just because I don't think it's going to succeed because it's not us anymore. And he ended up saying like, I'll admit some of that was my ego, but it's okay because crow is delicious. Basically acknowledging he was wrong. The show ended up being this huge
So he ate crow.
Yes, you are familiar with the phrase eating crow?
I am not, Captain.
Ah, fascinating. The etymology of it is basically that you have...
It sounds like a slur against African-American humanoids.
You would be very incorrect in that assessment. It basically means that you've made a statement that turns out to be completely wrong. And you are forced to backtrack and say, wow, I was wrong about that. They call that eating crow.
Never heard of it.
Well, Nimoy had, and he used it humorously, when describing how he was completely wrong about whether Next Generation would be a hit or not. He had predicted that it wouldn't, and it ended up being huge. And he was like, wow, crow was delicious.
Perhaps it is a Yiddish term that I was not familiar with.
Well, I don't think it gets tossed around a whole lot these days, but I was familiar with it.
This is actually a Hebrew prayer.
I believe it means like peace be with you.
Peace, God, yes. And, yes.
But kind of like really, I mean, the perfect sign-off ending is probably Star Trek VI, where they literally are signing off, and then they made Generations, and they're like, oh, psych.
Well, Nimoy didn't even want to be in Generations. Yeah, and he was like, I don't want to do this. There's no like, Spock part in here.
This isn't like a classic cast movie with all of us in it, and me in particular. I don't want to be in it.
It was like, I only have one line about the transporter.
That's dumb. I don't want to get put on the makeup just for that. And Shatner, of course, he was happy to do it.
But he did show up on Next Gen. Spock showed up on Next Gen in Investigation 1 and 2.
And it was
so did Sarah.
It was a much better part because it was a two-parter episode that actually revolved around his character
found him, Captain
doing
Picard.
Something like important to the canon.
And Spock always was trying to be in control of his emotions and trying to be more... He was trying to be more Vulcan than human, whereas Data was opposite of that.
Yeah.
They said so in the episode.
Kind of put a
that
spin
Data
on it.
Was sort of the opposite. Data wanted to be human. Data wanted to be what Spock was inspiring not to be all of his life. And Data wanted to be that.
That's probably why both characters, for slightly different reasons, like both of them became very iconic and beloved characters. Like everybody can sort of identify with, Spock. You could see the desire to like subvert his passions and be more intellectual, but not quite able to do it. You could always sense that like deep down inside he had this sort of humanish core.
And then Data was
Data was you could identify with him in that he was struggling to fit in and never quite figuring. So it was kind of like the two sides of the same coin. I
don't see no points on your ears, boy, but you sound like a Vulcan.
Yeah, and they put McCoy in the first episode of Next Gen. I didn't even know that, so it's kind of.
It's a scene that looks a little cheesy now, but I always liked it.
Well, the old age makeup was pretty bad even then.
But I liked it.
Well, it was a nice little shout out, kind of like what they did in the Abrams thing, where it's like, let's bring one of the original cast in here and have them sort of sign off on this. And again, that's the thing about Abrams reboots that I think rings the truest to me is that they did bring Nimoy back.
Yes, Nimoy, yes. And I don't think that either Data or Spock have like autism or anything or Asperger's. I don't think they do.
You could make a case that Data is something on the spectrum.
Somewhere on the spectrum. But he's a robot, so maybe Dr. Zoom programmed him that way. Yeah. Maybe Dr. Zoom had it.
It's like, well, I want to experiment on autism, so I'm going to create
They never explained that positonic brain thing, because if that was really positronic, his head would explode. Because it would be made from antimatter.
Yeah.
And it would hit the top of his skull and go...
Somebody was thumbing through the encyclopedia and thought, hey, this sounded awesome. Actually, somebody pointed out...
It was a reference to Asimov.
I just read a stat online that, at the time, and I think it's the first episode, Data's like, my brain can calculate, 4 trillion, kilobits or something per second. Somebody pointed out that's actually slower by a considerable margin than the fastest computers we have today. And Data is technology from centuries in the future. So somebody kind of dropped the ball on data, I guess. It's probably just like Soong's like portable cell phone or desktop.
Actually, they thought, ooh, in the future nothing will be 4,000 kilobytes.
Yeah.
Because it was 1986 and they're like 87.
Like these computers that people will have.
Because in 1986 you had a Mac.
I think we're still using Tandies.
Power Macs and stuff. Well, we had the Power Macs. I was using Apple II until 97. And
I was using a typewriter
and Apple talked stuff. Never went to the Macs until the conversion process. Then we went to the Mac.
Oh, yeah.
But in 97. So we went briefly to the Apple II and then to the Apple that middle of the road.
Oh,
one.
that weird mid-tier Apple thing.
The Apple thing that we sort of swiped from the lab.
We had permission. They said take it. All right. And then they were just going to junk it.
They were going to junk it anyway. So then we took the Apple home and ran the discs and then transferred it to the Mac. And
it's a good thing you did that because that was about the only way to get those.
The USB Mac to stuff didn't last long.
Yeah, no, the files were getting
Somebody came along with USB ports later.
Yeah, although I don't know, now today's word programs are sophisticated enough. I wonder if they can handle those old text files.
I don't think they could handle the really, really old ones because I have some of those really old ones in the computer and it can't see them.
Interesting.
So it's a good thing that they are transferred to Word.
Because I had some really old ones that my mid-tier desktop
Chinese.
Corrupted them and made them all weird, put little boxes and things in them. But then when I upgraded my computer again with a better version of Word, I opened them again and they opened just fine. So I think it was just that mid-tier version of the program wasn't smart enough. Anyway, I see that our battery is about to get out.
Anyway, so that's, I guess, on the Spock stuff. So.
Yeah, we were just basically reminiscing about
Spock.
Nimoy and Spock and the legacy of Star Trek, and
we'll
there
be
you have
discussing
it.
the toy show as well.
And in a couple of days, we will be able to talk about the toy show.
Yes. And not get a cold this
Hopefully
time.
not come back with chirpies. Any such similar disease.
Remember that picked over Toys R Us? That clearly had already been done.